The crystal glasses clinked as Caroline Blackwood, my mother-in-law, raised her hand to silence the dinner conversation. Her pearls gleamed under the chandelier light, matching her perfectly coiffed silver hair. From my seat at the far end of the mahogany dining table, I could already sense what was coming. "Now that we're all here," she announced, her voice carrying that distinctive tone of aristocratic authority, "I have exciting news. Sterling National Bank is about to complete its biggest merger in history, $40 million. She paused for effect, her eyes sweeping across our family gathering before deliberately skipping over me. "Of course, as executive vice president, I've been instrumental in making this happen." I took a small sip of wine, letting its warmth calm my nerves. After 5 years of marriage to her son Michael, I'd learned to weather these family dinners at the Blackwood Mansion. They always followed the same script. Caroline showcasing her latest banking triumph while subtly, or not so subtly, reminding everyone that I didn't belong in their world. "That's wonderful, Mother," Michael said from beside me, his hand finding mine under the table. He squeezed it gently, our private signal that meant just ignore it. But tonight would be different. I could feel it in the air, thick with unspoken tensions and old resentments. "Indeed," Caroline continued, swirling her wine. "Which reminds me, Linda dear, how is that little shop of yours doing?" The way she said shop made it sound like a particularly distasteful insect she found in her garden. "The Homestead Boutique is doing well, thank you," I replied evenly, using my business's full name. The small retail store I'd built from scratch specialized in handcrafted home goods and local artisan pieces. It wasn't Sterling National Bank, but it was mine, built with every penny I'd saved and every lesson I'd learned watching my immigrant parents run their grocery store. Caroline's perfectly lined lips curved into what might generously be called a smile. "How quaint, though I must say, it's rather embarrassing when my friends ask what my daughter-in-law does. She runs a shabby little shop in the old district. Isn't exactly what one hopes to say in my position." The table fell silent. Even the usual clink of silverware stopped. Michael tensed beside me, but before he could speak, his mother pressed on, her voice dripping with false concern. "You know, Linda, if you just accepted my offer to help you find a proper position at the bank, you wouldn't have to waste your time with such pedestrian ventures. I deal with real businesses, dear, companies that matter." 5 years of calculated insults of being treated like an unwanted houseguest in my own family crystallized in that moment. I placed my napkin carefully on the table and stood up. "Thank you for dinner, Caroline. But I should go. I have some important business matters to attend to." "Business matters?" She laughed, the sound like ice cracking. "At that little shop? Please, Linda, don't be dramatic. Sit down." I smiled, thinking of the documents sitting in my home office safe. Documents that Caroline, for all her banking expertise, had never bothered to investigate. "No, I really must go. But I'm sure tomorrow will be an interesting day at Sterling National. Good luck with the merger." As I walked out, leaving behind Caroline's dismissive laughter and Michael's concerned calls, I felt a strange sense of calm. Tomorrow Caroline Blackwood would learn that sometimes the smallest shops can cast the longest shadows. Back home, in my study, I opened the safe and pulled out a folder marked Sterling Holdings LC. Inside were papers that told a very different story about my shabby little shop. Documents that proved the Homestead Boutique was just the visible tip of a much larger enterprise. You see, what Caroline never bothered to learn was that before I opened my shop, I'd spent 10 years in commercial real estate investment. The boutique was my passion project, yes, but behind it stood a holding company that owned significant shares in several regional banks, including, through a series of careful acquisitions, a 12% stake in Sterling National. And tomorrow, when the merger vote came up, that 12% would be the deciding factor. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I rarely used. "Mr. Patterson." "Yes, this is Linda Chen. About tomorrow's Sterling National shareholder vote. I've made my decision." As I hung up, I thought about Caroline's words. Companies that matter. Tomorrow, she would learn just how much my little shop mattered. And as I prepared the documents I'd present at tomorrow's board meeting, I couldn't help but smile, thinking of the look that would cross Caroline's face when she realized who really held the power to approve, or deny, her precious $40 million merger. Sometimes the smallest businesses cast the longest shadows, and tomorrow, My shadow would reach all the way to Caroline Blackwood's executive suite. The Sterling National Bank boardroom gleamed with old money and new ambition. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping view of the city skyline, while portraits of past bank presidents washed over the proceedings with painted gravity. I sat quietly in the back row of the shareholder section, dressed in a simple black suit that would have earned Caroline's disapproval. My mother-in-law stood at the podium, resplendent in her signature pearl necklace and navy power suit, presenting the merger details to the assembled board members and major shareholders. Her voice carried that familiar tone of absolute authority. "This merger represents a historic opportunity for Sterling National," she declared, clicking through slides of impressive projections and growth charts. "With Meridian Trust's assets and our market position, we're looking at a $40 million deal that will transform regional banking." I glanced at my watch. In exactly 3 minutes, Mr. Patterson, my proxy advisor, would make his entrance. Caroline was just reaching her crescendo. "The shareholder vote is essentially a formality," she said, allowing herself a small, satisfied smile. "We've secured commitments from all major stakeholders. By this afternoon, Sterling National will." The boardroom door opened. Mr. Patterson walked in, his presence commanding immediate attention. Caroline paused, annoyance flickering across her carefully composed face. "My apologies for the interruption," Mr. Patterson said, his voice carrying clearly across the room. "But before we proceed with the vote, there's a matter of significant shareholder interest that needs to be addressed." Caroline's fingers tightened on the podium. "Mr. Patterson, we're in the middle of. I represent Sterling Holdings LC," he continued smoothly, "which controls 12% of Sterling National's voting shares. My client has some concerns about the proposed merger terms." The room stirred. 12% was enough to swing the vote. Caroline's eyes narrowed as she scanned a document in front of her. "Sterling Holdings. I'm not familiar with." She stopped abruptly, her face paling as Mr. Patterson handed her a folder. "Perhaps this will clarify matters," he said. "Sterling Holdings LC, founded by Linda Chen." Caroline's head snapped up, her eyes finding me in the back row. For the first time in 5 years, I saw something new in her expression. Fear. I stood up slowly, smoothing my jacket. "Hello, Caroline. Shall we discuss those real businesses now?" The next hour was a study in controlled chaos. As Mr. Patterson laid out my concerns about the merger's impact on local lending practices and community investment, Caroline's carefully constructed deal began to unravel. Her allies on the board shifted uncomfortably in their seats as they realized the power dynamics had suddenly changed. "This is absurd," Caroline finally burst out, her composure cracking. "You run a small retail shop. How could you possibly own enough shares to influence Sterling National's biggest merger?" I finished for her, walking to the front of the room. "The same way you built your career, Caroline. Through careful planning, strategic investments," and I paused, letting the irony sink in. "Understanding what really matters in business." I turned to address the board directly. The Homestead Boutique was never my only business interest. While Caroline was dismissing me as a small-time shopkeeper, I was building a diverse investment portfolio. Sterling Holdings LC owns not just shares in this bank, but significant interests in commercial real estate and regional financial institutions across 3 states. Opening my laptop, I projected my own presentation onto the screen. "I have an alternative proposal for the merger, one that preserves local lending authority and maintains community investment requirements." I clicked through detailed financial projections, one that will actually increase shareholder value by 15% over Caroline's plan. The board members leaned forward, their interest piqued. Caroline stood frozen at the podium, watching as her carefully constructed power base shifted beneath her feet. "Mr. Chairman," I concluded, "I move to table the current merger proposal in favor of a more detailed review of both options." The vote wasn't even close. As the boardroom emptied 2 hours later, Caroline remained rooted in place, staring at the documents that had shattered her plans. I approached her quietly. "You know what the saddest part is, Caroline? If you'd ever bothered to really know me, to look past your prejudices about my shabby little shop, you might have found a valuable ally instead of an opponent." She looked up, years of carefully maintained superiority crumbling. "Why didn't you tell us? Tell Michael? Would you have believed me?" I asked simply. "Or would you have seen it as another opportunity to remind me of my place?" The silence between us held years of missed connections and wasted opportunities. Finally, Caroline spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. What happens now? Now, now we have a choice. We can continue as adversaries, or I laid my alternative merger proposal on the table between us. We can work together to build something better. Your banking expertise and my investment network could make Sterling National a force for both profit and positive change in the community. She picked up the proposal, reading it with new eyes. This is actually brilliant, she admitted reluctantly. I learned from watching my parents' grocery store that real success isn't just about big numbers. It's about understanding your community, building relationships, and creating value that lasts. I smiled slightly. Even a shabby little shop can teach us lessons. Caroline nodded slowly, a glimmer of respect finally showing in her eyes. I may have misjudged some things. Maybe we both did, I offered. Dinner at my house next week. We can discuss the merger details and maybe start over. That evening, as I closed up the Homestead Boutique, I ran my hand along the handcrafted wooden shelves my father had helped me install. The shop's warm lighting illuminated local artworks and carefully curated home goods. It wasn't Sterling National Bank, but it was the heart of everything I built. Michael was waiting outside, leaning against his car. So, he said, pulling me into a hug, my wife's secretly a financial mogul. I laughed against his chest. Your wife is someone who learned that true worth isn't always visible on the surface. I looked up at him. Are you angry I didn't tell you? He shook his head, smiling. Proud, actually. Though I would have loved to see Mother's face when she realized. It was memorable, I admitted. But you know what's even better? I think for the first time she actually saw me, really saw me. As we drove home, I thought about Caroline's words from the previous night, companies that matter. She'd been right about one thing: size and appearance don't determine what matters. Sometimes the most important changes start in the smallest places, like a family grocery store or a shabby little shop that harbored bigger dreams. The merger eventually went through, restructured to balance profit with community impact. Caroline and I developed an unexpected partnership, combining her old-school banking prowess with my community-focused investment approach. The Homestead Boutique remained my heart, but now it was just one part of a larger legacy, proof that success comes in many forms, and that true worth lies not in appearances, but in the foundations we build and the changes we inspire. Every morning, as I unlock the shop's door, I smile at the small plaque my parents gave me when I first opened. The mightiest trees grow from the smallest seeds. Caroline passes by sometimes on her way to the bank, stopping in to chat or discuss business. She's different now, we both are. We've learned that real power isn't about putting others in their place, but about helping everyone find where they truly belong. And as for that shabby little shop, it's still here, still growing, still proving that sometimes the smallest businesses cast the longest shadows and shine the brightest lights.